Imagine spending, I don't know, maybe $500 million designing just this perfect luxury aviation
Or
terminal.
easily. That kind of capital is standard.
Right. And you pour absolute fortunes into the marble flooring, the ambient lighting, the sweeping architectural curves. I mean, the blueprints are completely flawless.
The engineering is pristine.
Exactly, pristine. But then you realize that maybe a slight acoustic echo near the security gates is subconsciously triggering anxiety in your most high net worth passenger.
Which happens all the time, honestly.
Yeah, and so you have this invisible friction in the space. Just a subtle, creeping unease that is quietly eroding your brand's equity. And the absolute worst part,
You have no idea it is happening.
you have absolutely no idea. Well, until now.
Because that invisible friction, that is the great blind spot of modern spatial design.
Yeah.
We are incredibly adept at measuring the structural integrity of a building, right?
Right.
Or the logistical throughput of a massive crowd.
Sure, how fast people move through a door.
Right. But measuring the actual real-time psychological experience of the people inside that space, that has always been the missing metric.
So if you are listening to this, I am speaking directly to you. You are likely a senior decision maker. You might be a CEO, a top management figure, or a lead developer.
Operating in some of the most complex environments on the planet.
Exactly. We're talking about the leaders behind the world's most impressive super yachts, expansive cruise lines, luxury hotel conglomerates, aviation hubs, prime commercial real estate.
High-stakes environments.
Very high stakes. You deal in spaces where billions of dollars are on the line to create a very specific premium experience. And today, well, our mission for this deep dive is to unpack a highly strategic briefing document,
From EURAN, the European Art Networks.
right from EURAN. We are dissecting their cultural operating system, the COS, and the absolute centerpiece of that framework, which is the SPVI, or the Space Perceived Value Index.
And we really should establish the stakes of this framework immediately, because what EURAN has developed is not theoretical architecture.
Right, this isn't an art project.
No, not at all. We are not discussing avant-garde design philosophy here.
Yeah.
This is an applied, industrial, and highly operational technology.
Which is what makes it so fascinating.
Exactly. It is a system designed specifically to protect and elevate the massive capital investments you manage by giving those spaces a form of perceptual intelligence.
So it literally allows an airport or a hotel to mathematically read how humans are feeling.
Yes, and then intelligently adapt to those humans in real time.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the core objective here is bridging a massive operational gap. I mean, we are taking this incredibly abstract concept of, how a space feels and turning it into a concrete, actionable mechanism.
We are treating perceptual intelligence as a protective governance layer for your physical assets.
Yeah, so let's start with the foundational premise of this entire system. EURAN argues that every environment you build actually consists of two distinct realities.
The premise is profound, really, because it forces a shift in how executives view their own properties. So the first reality is what they call the designed reality.
Right, the ideal state.
Exactly. It is your architectural intent. It's the meticulously rendered 3D models you approved in the boardroom, the acoustic engineering reports, the curated lighting design.
It's the space as you intended it to be.
Yes, the building on its absolute best day.
Completely empty of people.
Precisely. But the moment you open the doors, well, you introduce the second reality, which is the lived reality.
And humans are unpredictable.
Extremely unpredictable. The lived reality is what actually happens when thousands of those humans interact with your design. It's what happens on a random Tuesday afternoon when it is sleeting outside, 3 transatlantic flights have just been delayed, and the baggage carousels are jammed.
Right, so suddenly this pristine, calm environment you designed just becomes chaotic.
Chaotic and stressful. The lived reality almost always deviates from the designed reality.
But hold on, let me play devil's advocate for a second. If I'm an executive, I'm looking at my operations dashboard right now. I have foot traffic counters tracking every smartphone MASI address in the building.
You have the data.
I have tons of data. I have heat maps showing me exactly where people congregate. I have extensive post-stay sentiment surveys that my data team compiles every quarter. I mean, I know how people are using my spaces.
Or you think you do.
Right, so why isn't that enough? Isn't this SPVI concept just a glorified security camera combined with, advanced sentiment analysis?
Well, that is the exact trap that legacy management systems fall into.
How so?
Because sentiment analysis, your post-stay surveys, for instance, is inherently retrospective. and it's heavily biased.
Oh, because they're filling it out days later?
Exactly. You're asking a guest to remember how they felt 3 days ago, translate that vague memory into language, and then assign it a number out of 10. By the time you get that data, the opportunity to fix the experience is long gone.
That makes sense. And what about the heat maps?
On the other hand, your heat maps and traffic counters are purely logistical. They tell you that 300 physical bodies moved from point A to point B.
Like tracking units on a factory floor.
Yes, they treat humans like cargo. They do not tell you why those people moved, and they certainly don't tell you the psychological state of those people during the movement.
So they track the meat, but they completely ignore the mine.
That is an excellent way to put it. SPVI bridges that exact gap. It operates on a deeply rooted biological principle, which is that humans broadcast their internal perceptual state through their physical behavior.
We can't help it.
We really can't. Our movement is a language. SPVI converts observable physical behaviors into structured, quantifiable indicators.
Like what kind of behaviors?
The velocity of a walk, the duration of a pause, the physical distance between individuals in a group, or even a sudden hesitation at a corridor intersection. It translates physical geometry into psychological reality.
Okay, so it's looking at the real nuance of the movement. Like, imagine a family standing in a sprawling luxury resort lobby.
A very common scenario.
Right, so a standard traffic counter just logs, 4 people in Sector 7G for 3 minutes.
Which is essentially useless data.
Exactly, it tells you nothing. But SPVI looks at the granular behavior. It sees that the family walked halfway to the elevators, stopped abruptly, clustered very tightly together. The parents rotated their bodies 360 degrees, scanning the room, and then slowly, maybe tentatively, walked toward a staff member.
Yes, and SPVI reads that specific choreography. It doesn't just say dwell time. It says that is hesitation. That is spatial confusion.
So it knows the perceived value of that premium arrival experience is currently plummeting.
Exactly. The system is reading the behavioral vocabulary of the space in real time. For the executive listener, this is where the return on investment becomes glaringly obvious.
You spend so much on the space.
You spend tens, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars on the designed reality to create a specific brand value. SPVI is the real-time insurance policy on that capital expenditure.
It makes sure the value is actually landing.
It ensures that the intended value, the operational efficiency, and the emotional resonance are actually being received by the user right now in the lived reality.
Which brings us to the engine itself. Because SPVI isn't just an analytics dashboard that a mid-level manager reviews at the end of the month over coffee.
No, it is an active system.
It is the sensory organ for a much larger active system. The briefing calls this the adaptive governance loop.
EURAN situates SPVI at the absolute center of what they term a cybernetic loop within the cultural operating system.
And we should probably clarify cybernetic here.
Yes, we should use the word in its original systemic sense. It means a continuous system of communication and control via feedback loops.
A biological feedback loop, but applied to concrete and steel. Let's walk through the actual flow of this loop. It begins with the MSF, right? The Master Strategy Framework.
Correct. The MSF is essentially the DNA of the building.
The baseline identity.
The intended narrative, the operational rules of the space, the MSF authors the environment. Then the humans enter and begin interacting with it.
And as they move, SPVI is constantly monitoring that behavior language we just talked about.
And here is where it gets really interesting. Here's the critical operational pivot. When SPCI detects a variation, say, a sudden drift in meaning, a spike in spatial anxiety, or a collapse in engagement, it does not passively log a data point.
It doesn't just send an email.
No, it acts as an active trigger. It communicates back to the cultural operating system, which then instantly activates highly specific intervention modules.
So the environment literally adjusts itself to correct the drift. That is fascinating.
It happens instantly.
So like the lighting color temperature might subtly warm up, the digital signage might resequence to simplify its messaging, the ambient acoustic profile might introduce a totally different frequency.
The space physically adapts to the psychological state of the human.
The human's behavior then stabilizes in response. SPVI measures that successful stabilization, and the loop just continues indefinitely.
This creates an environment that is constantly breathing, constantly tuning itself to the exact needs of the moment. And EURAN makes a very sharp distinction here that executives really need to internalize.
What's the distinction?
They state explicitly, this is not optimization. It is cultural governance.
Wow. Okay, that's a massive distinction because in the corporate world, Optimization is the ultimate buzzword.
It's everywhere.
It's the holy grail of operations. So why push back against optimization?
Because in the context of spatial management, optimization almost always devolves into raw logistical efficiency. It becomes about moving units through a pipe.
How quickly can we push passengers through the TSA checkpoint?
Exactly. Or how fast can we turn over a table in the dining room? Optimization treats human beings as friction that needs to be eliminated.
Just obstacles.
Right. Cultural governance, however, acknowledges that you are running a premium brand. Governance means continuously aligning the environment's meaning, its clarity, and its identity with the real, on-the-ground conditions.
Protecting the feeling of the space. Protecting the emotional value of the space, even when the operational systems are under immense stress.
So optimization is making the security line move 10% faster by yelling at people to take their shoes off earlier.
Which is awful for the brand.
Exactly. Cultural governance is ensuring that while they are standing in that line, the cognitive load is managed, the ambient environment lowers their cortisol levels, and the premium identity of the airline brand is preserved. You are governing the human experience, not just the logistical throughput.
And to execute that level of governance, the system relies on a highly rigorous framework they call the architecture of behavior.
Because we need a proxy for perceived value.
Right. If human behavior is the proxy, we need to understand exactly what invisible structures SPVI is mapping.
Let's get into the mechanics of how it actually reads the room. We know it's not just tracking speed.
It monitors deep behavioral categories: exploration, acceleration, avoidance, and repetition. These are the invisible structures that dictate whether a massive hotel lobby feels like a vibrant, welcoming hub or just a chaotic, stressful transit hall.
Take the concept of avoidance, for example. It is a powerful behavioral indicator with very deep evolutionary roots.
What does that look in a building?
Well, imagine a massive mixed-use retail space in a prime commercial development. The architect designed a stunning, sweeping central atrium with a high-end seating lounge right in the middle, intended as a premium gathering spot.
Sounds beautiful on paper.
But SPVI detects a chronic avoidance pattern. People are walking around the lounge, hugging the perimeter walls of the atrium. They are actively avoiding the center.
And a traditional security camera just sees empty chairs.
Exactly. The human security guard sees nothing wrong. But SPVI reads the avoidance pattern and translates it mathematically.
It says something is wrong with the lived reality.
It tells the system the lived reality of this atrium is broken. Perhaps the acoustic bounce off the glass ceiling makes the center feel overwhelmingly loud. Or perhaps the lighting makes people feel exposed, triggering a deeply ingrained evolutionary desire for prospect and refuge, the need to have our backs against a wall when we feel vulnerable.
So the invisible structure of that space is currently projecting stress, not luxury.
Exactly.
And once it maps that stress, it knows exactly how to respond. The system uses this sort of if this, then that architecture, mapping specific human failures to specific operational modules.
The mapping logic is the absolute core of the adaptive engine.
Let's walk through these triggers because this is where the rubber meets the road for property management.
Let's start with a very common scenario, a drop in engagement. Imagine a sweeping gallery space or a massive retail promenade on a cruise ship.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
People are moving through the space, but their dwell time at points of interest is virtually zero. They are walking with purpose, heads down.
They are treating a premium experiential space like a subway tunnel. It's just a transit corridor to them.
When SPVI detects this specific lack of engagement, it automatically triggers two distinct modules: the CCD to reinforce cultural resonance, and the MNIE to realign the narrative framing.
So the space literally changes around them.
The space itself begins to subtly alter its digital content, its lighting highlights, and its soundscape to grab attention and restore the intended narrative of discovery and luxury.
What if the issue is purely physical? Say, circulation and flow issues. You have bottlenecking or sudden erratic changes in walking pace.
That physical friction triggers the DNW module, which is dedicated to restoring spatial clarity. It intervenes to help people intuitively understand where they are and what the optimal path forward is without them having to stop and ask for directions.
And then there's the trigger that really caught my eye: spatial coherence failing.
A very critical failure state.
I have a very personal, visceral reaction to that phrase. It perfectly describes that rising sense of absolute panic you get when you are hopelessly lost.
We have all been there.
I remember being at a massive casino resort in Vegas years ago. I was trying to find a specific restaurant, and every single carpeted hallway, every bank of slot machines, every lighting fixture looked exactly the same.
Designed to keep you inside.
Exactly. I started looping, backtracking, my heart rate was elevating. I mean, I was a grown adult experiencing genuine distress just trying to find a steakhouse.
That is the quintessential failure of spatial coherence. The built environment has lost its legibility entirely. When SPVI detect those specific behavioral markers, the looping, the sudden stops, the erratic changes in direction, it initiates a dual intervention.
What does it do?
It triggers the DNW to restore basic physical wayfinding, literally guiding the user out of the confusion. But more importantly, it triggers the PRA module.
The psychological module.
Yes, the PRA's sole job is to restore emotional clarity. It steps in to subconsciously stabilize the exact anxiety you are feeling in that casino.
It's like the building senses your rising panic before you even consciously process it, and it throws you a psychological life preserver.
It is remarkably empathetic.
And finally, the highest level of alert. When value signals waver. When the overall perception of the space as a premium luxury environment just starts to collapse.
When that baseline value is threatened, the system initiates a massive multi-layered recalibration. It fires the MNIE, the PRA, and the CCD simultaneously.
An all-hands-on-deck response.
It is an all-hands-on-deck, holistic adjustment across the entire environment to immediately recalibrate meaning, provide reassurance, and inject cultural resonance back into the space.
For any executive managing these environments, the strategic application here is just revolutionary. It completely removes the guesswork.
It changes the entire operational paradigm.
We used to think that a guest's perception of a luxury space was entirely subjective, right? A black box we couldn't unlock until we read their Yelp review a week later.
But EURAN's framework proves otherwise.
It proves that human perception leaves a physical weight. It leaves a behavioral footprint. And by mapping that footprint, you are automating empathy at an industrial scale.
Automating empathy. It is a striking phrase and entirely accurate. But to truly understand the scale of this empathy, we need to open up the toolkit.
We need to get into the detail.
Yes, we need to spend serious time dissecting these 4 operational modules.
Let's do it. We've thrown around these acronyms MNIE, PRA, CCD, DNW. I want to use an analogy here. Managing a billion-dollar commercial asset with this system is like sitting behind a massive audio mixing board in a recording studio.
A very apt metaphor.
You have these 4 distinct faders. In normal conditions, the adjustments are incredibly subtle. You nudge a fader up a millimeter to warm up the room. But in extraordinary conditions, when the system is under extreme stress, you make decisive, sweeping changes to the mix to save the track.
The soundboard metaphor is perfectly aligned with the cybernetic nature of the system. Let us look closely at the first fader on our board, the MNIE,
Which stands for?
the Modular Narrative Intelligence Engine. Its primary function is to govern the narrative logic of the environment.
Because every premium space is telling a story.
Inherently, a luxury hotel lobby is telling a story of exclusivity, escape, and meticulous care. An aviation hub is telling a story of global connection, efficiency, and anticipation.
And the MNIE maintains that story.
The MNIE ensures that the story the users are actually experiencing remains perfectly aligned with the real-world conditions, even when those conditions change drastically. It intervenes when SPVI detects narrative disconnect or experiential drift.
Let's put this into a concrete, extended industry scenario. Let's talk about the superyacht and cruise sector.
In a marine environment, the narrative is incredibly susceptible to external forces. Imagine a grand, open-air promenade deck on a luxury cruise vessel.
The ultimate sunset cocktail venue.
Exactly. The architectural intent, the designed reality is high energy, outward-looking, vibrant. But suddenly a severe, unexpected weather front rolls in.
The lived reality shifts.
The sky turns gray, the temperature drops, the wind picks up. The physical space remains the same, but the narrative has violently drifted. The story of vibrant sunset party is utterly broken. The lid's reality is now desolate, cold, and disjointed.
The passengers step out onto the deck, feel the wind, look around at the empty space, and immediately retreat inside. The engagement drops to 0.
Precisely. STVI detects that immediate behavioral retreat and triggers the MNIE. The engine writes a new script for the space on the fly.
Because it knows the old script is dead.
It realizes it can no longer sell the outdoor party narrative. So it pulls down the fader on outward anticipation and pushes up the fader on intimate exclusivity.
What does that actually look like?
The digital architectural lighting shifts from bright, high-energy colors to warm, flickering amber tones that simulate a hearth. The ambient acoustic profile shifts from upbeat tropical rhythms to a rich, insulated, low-tempo acoustic lounge mix.
And the screens.
Digital art installations, which perhaps were showing sweeping ocean vistas, transition to abstract, cozy, macro-level textures.
Wow, it fundamentally changes the emotional temperature of the room. It repositions the deck from failed outdoor party to exclusive sheltered twilight retreat.
And the passengers respond to that new narrative.
The passengers, who are about to leave, suddenly find themselves pulling up a chair and ordering a whiskey. It's behavioral nudging through dynamic storytelling.
And this application extends far beyond hospitality. In aviation, the MNIE acts to clarify the emotional arc of a cabin.
Like during turbulence.
Exactly. If severe turbulence has caused a spike in passenger tension, the core narrative of a safe, relaxing journey is fractured. Once the turbulence subsides, the passengers remain physiologically stressed. Their cortisol is still high.
They're still gripping the armrests.
The MNIE steps in. It subtly shifts the environmental cues. The cabin lighting temperature slowly transitions to a calming circadian-aligned spectrum. The digital displays on the seatbacks shift their pacing to slower, more rhythmic transitions.
It slowly, deliberately rebuilds the narrative of calm and control.
It's actively de-escalating the physiological stress of the passengers.
That leads us perfectly into the second fader on our soundboard, the PRA, the Perception and Reassurance Architecture. If MNIE is the storyteller, PRA is the psychological safety net.
The PRA is perhaps the most direct biological intervention in the entire toolkit. Its sole mandate is to stabilize emotional clarity and rebuild trust.
When does it activate?
It activates when SPVI detects high cognitive load, hesitation, and spatial anxiety. When the human brain is overwhelmed by the built environment, the PRA intervenes to reduce that friction.
We have to talk about airports here, because nothing generates spatial anxiety quite like a major international aviation hub.
Airports are engines of cognitive load. Let us imagine a severe operational disruption. A massive winter storm grounds flights across the eastern seaboard.
Absolute chaos.
You have a terminal designed to hold 10,000 people, currently packed with 15,000. They are looking for answers. Their movement becomes erratic. They are clustering around departure boards, dragging heavy luggage.
SPVI detects an explosion of mass anxiety.
The behavioral geometry of the terminal is radiating stress.
The traditional response is for an exhausted gate agent to get on a crackling microphone and yell instructions that no one can hear over the din.
Which just adds to the chaos.
Exactly.
But with this system, the mass anxiety triggers a macro intervention from the PRA module. The environment itself steps in to lower the collective blood pressure.
How does it do that?
The PRA will aggressively simplify the digital signage across the entire concourse. It removes all advertising, all secondary information, and displays only the absolute essential updates in high contrast, low visual noise formatting.
It literally reduces the amount of visual data the stressed brain has to process.
Yes, exactly.
And what about the acoustics? Because the sound of a delayed airport is just deafening.
The PRA alters the acoustic profile of the space. It can introduce specific, low-frequency rhythmic ambient layers into the public address system.
Wait, like a beat?
Yes. Why? Because introducing a subtle rhythmic frequency around 60 beats per minute subconsciously mimics a resting human heartbeat.
Oh.
Biological studies show that environments with these acoustic properties naturally suppress cortisol production in humans.
That is staggering.
The system softens the transitions between zones, clarifies the physical expectations, and literally grounds the passengers biologically.
You are using the architecture to administer a subconscious sedative. And what about complex luxury hotels?
Modern luxury resorts are often intentionally designed to be sprawling, labyrinthine, and visually complex to encourage exploration. But that complexity can easily tip over into frustration.
Right, if you can't find your room.
If SPVI detects guests frequently stopping, spinning around, and backtracking in a particular wing of the resort, it registers a spike in cognitive load. The PRA module engages.
To guide them out.
It might subtly increase the illumination on key architectural waypoints, like a specific sculpture or a corridor junction, while slightly dimming the dead ends. It uses light to subconsciously pull the guest toward the main atrium, restoring their confidence without them ever realizing they were being guided.
The building realizes you are lost and lights a breadcrumb trail before you even have to ask for help. It's brilliant. Let's move to the third fader. The CCD.
the Cultural Continuity Deck.
This module seems entirely focused on keeping the soul of a space alive.
The CCD maintains cultural resonance. It activates when SPVI detects abnormally low dwell times or a cultural disconnect between the user and the space.
So if PRA fixes stress, CCD fixes apathy.
Precisely. When a space feels dormant, dead, or uninspired, the CCD dynamically adjusts the curated content, the symbolic anchors, and the programming rhythms to re-engage the user.
Let's look at prime real estate for this one.
Consider a flagship, mixed-use corporate campus with a massive ground-floor retail and amenity promenade. At 8:30 a.m., the space is buzzing with high-energy commuters.
The morning rush.
The space naturally feels alive. But at 3 p.m. on a Thursday, the foot traffic thins out. The people who are walking through are just passing by. They aren't stopping. They aren't engaging.
The dreaded afternoon slump.
The space has lost its cultural magnetism. It feels dead.
And a dead space is terrible for retail yields and terrible for brand equity.
Precisely. The CCD detects this specific flavor of behavioral apathy. It intervenes to re-energize the promenade.
By doing what exactly?
It might dynamically shift the massive digital art installations from static, calm imagery to highly kinetic, arresting content that forces the eye to track it. It subtly increases the tempo of the background audio.
Waking people up.
It alters the lighting zones to create sharp, dramatic contrasts that highlight the thresholds of the high-end retail stores, drawing people in. The environment actively fights against the afternoon slump, recapturing the attention and imagination of the users.
It maintains the premium vibe continuously. You don't just build a beautiful amenity floor. The CCD ensures that floor continuously projects the brand's identity, adapting its rhythm from the morning rush to the afternoon lull to the evening wind down.
A continuous pulse.
And finally, we have the fourth module, the DNW, Dynamic Narrative Wayfinding.
The DNW is pure kinetic governance. It ensures spatial legibility and flow.
Crowd control, essentially.
Yes, but intelligent crowd control. It intervenes the moment SPCI detects bottlenecking, mass disorientation, or total circulation failure. It dynamically adjusts signage, orientation cues, and spatial communication to redirect the flow of human mass and clarify physical transitions.
The prime example here has to be the modern megaships in the cruise industry. These vessels are literally floating cities, holding 6, sometimes 8,000 passengers.
And the kinetic challenges on a vessel of that scale are immense. Imagine the main theater lets out 3,000 passengers at the exact same moment the primary dining room empties out 2,000 passengers.
5,000 people all hitting the same corridor.
They all converge on the same central promenade deck. You have an immediate, severe circulation failure. The physical space simply cannot process that volume of chaotic, multidirectional movement.
People are bumping into each other, tempers are flaring, everyone is trying to get to the elevators. It's a logistical nightmare.
SPVI detects the critical bottleneck the second it begins forming. The DNW module reacts instantly. It transforms the environment into an active crowd control mechanism.
What's the intervention?
It dynamically alters the digital floor-level wayfinding displays to create clear, unidirectional lanes of traffic. It might change the color temperature of the overhead lighting in adjacent underutilized corridors to naturally draw crowds away from the central choke point.
Rerouting the flow.
It rapidly adjusts digital signage to promote alternative routes to the upper decks. It reestablishes the kinetic logic of the path without requiring a dozen security guards to shout into megaphones.
It's crowd control through environmental psychology.
Yeah.
So when you step back and look at the entire soundboard, the narrative storytelling of MNIE, the psychological safety net of PRA, the cultural energy of CCD, and the kinetic flow of DNW, you realize we're talking about a fundamental paradigm shift in commercial real estate and hospitality.
It really is.
The built environment is no longer a static container that we force humans into. It is a responsive living organism. It is a highly empathetic machine.
It is the evolution from a building that merely houses people to a building that actively collaborates with human biology and psychology.
And that collaboration happens on a spectrum, because managing a sleepy Tuesday afternoon requires a very different touch than managing a Category 5 hurricane.
Yes, the intensity of intervention scales.
How does this system handle the vast spectrum of operational stress? This brings us to the 2 operational intensities outlined in the EURAN briefing.
EURAN makes a very clear structural distinction between how the COS applies its interventions. It divides its operations into 2 distinct intensities: normal conditions, which involve micro-adjustments, and extraordinary conditions, which require macro-adjustments.
Let's start with the everyday rhythm, normal operations.
During normal conditions, SPVI is in a state of continuous ambient monitoring. The behavioral variations it detects are incredibly subtle.
Tiny fluctuation.
A slight 5% drop in engagement here, a minor momentary hesitation at a corridor intersection there. In response, the system initiates micro-adjustments.
These are the millimeter nudges on our soundboard.
Yes, these are refinements that do not alter the fundamental structure or narrative of the space. They are tiny course corrections. The briefing notes that these include subtle shifts in lighting states, imperceptible acoustic recalibrations, or slight changes in the pacing of digital content.
And the crucial part is that these micro adjustments are entirely invisible to the user.
That invisibility is their greatest strength. The user never consciously processes that the lighting just got 2% warmer or that the ambient track just dropped by 10 beats per minute.
They just feel better.
They only know that suddenly they feel a little more relaxed, a little more engaged. Their behavior stabilizes. It is the architectural equivalent of an autopilot system on a commercial jet making hundreds of tiny, imperceptible adjustments to the flaps every second to maintain a perfectly smooth ride.
The passengers never know the wind is shifting outside. They only experience the stability.
Exactly.
But then, the wind doesn't just shift. A massive storm hits. Things break. The physical environment faces severe stress. We enter what EURAN defines as extraordinary situations.
Extraordinary conditions occur when there is a sharp, sudden, and severe drop in human perception.
What triggers that?
The text is very specific about the triggers for this intensity. Severe operational disruptions, such as massive flight delays or terminal closures, environmental stress, such as extreme weather events or sudden, unexpected overcrowding, or a complete experiential collapse, where the intended identity, the luxury space, simply fails under the weight of external pressure.
Micro adjustments aren't going to cut it anymore.
Exactly. A 2% shift in lighting will not stop a panic. In these moments, SPVI triggers macro adjustments. These are decisive, sweeping, and highly visible interventions across all 4 modules.
We're slamming the faders.
We're talking about major spatial recalibrations, fundamentally rewriting the narrative flow of the building, and initiating emergency reassurance protocols.
Let's use an extended scenario to illustrate this, because the difference between crisis management and what this system does is vital. Let's go back to the cruise industry.
A great testing ground for this.
Imagine a flagship luxury vessel 7 days into a Caribbean itinerary. The marquee port of call the destination everyone paid thousands of dollars to see has to be canceled at the last minute because a massive unseasonal weather front has made the harbor unsafe. The ship must remain at sea.
Let us examine the operational reality of that moment. Physically, the ship is perfectly fine. The engines are running smoothly. The stabilizers are engaged. The kitchens are fully stocked and cooking.
Logistically, operations are continuing normally. There is no physical crisis.
But psychologically, the ship is sinking.
That is precisely what SPVI detects. The physical vessel is uncompromised, but the perceptual layer registers an immediate violent shift in the lived reality.
It sees the behavioral data crash.
SPVI notes a massive reduction in engagement with all onboard content. It registers plummeting participation in scheduled activities. It sees passengers abandoning the public promenades and retreating to their cabins, or wandering aimlessly through the corridors with high degrees of hesitation.
The guests are experiencing severe narrative whiplash. They woke up expecting to explore tropical ruins, and instead, they are trapped indoors looking at gray skies. They are frustrated, disappointed, and bored.
In the system's terminology, SPVI has identified a severe drop in perceived value due to a total loss of narrative coherence.
And without SPVI, what happens next?
The cruise director makes an apologetic announcement over the PA system. Maybe the bars offer a week happy hour special, and the passengers simply stew in their disappointment for the next 24 hours.
The brand equity takes a massive hit.
The post-cruise surveys will be disastrous, and the onboard revenue from casinos and specialty dining plummets because people are hiding in their rooms. It's a lost day that costs the company millions in future bookings.
But with the cultural operating system engaged, the outcome is entirely different.
Tell me how.
With COS, the system sees the behavioral data crash in real time, and it launches a coordinated macro adjustment. The MNIE completely rewrites the storyline of the day. It shifts the entire digital and ambient environment from outward-looking anticipation to inward-looking, ultra-luxurious exclusivity.
It changes the whole vibe of the ship.
The CCD aggressively scales up the cultural programming, altering the symbolic anchors in the massive public atriums to create undeniable magnetic focal points that draw people out of their cabins.
And the PRA?
The PRA module works to manage the lingering psychological disappointment by ensuring all spatial communication is hyper-clear, reducing any further cognitive load.
It transforms a ruined itinerary into an exclusive, spontaneous indoor festival of luxury. The environment pivots so aggressively that the passengers forget they were supposed to be somewhere else.
And the result is measurable. Engagement stabilizes, onboard revenue streams recover, and the perceived value of the premium experience is fiercely protected, despite the massive operational disruption.
And that brings us to the most profound paradigm shift in this entire briefing. EURAN states, macro adjustments are not crisis management. They are cultural stabilization.
That distinction is everything. Crisis management is logistical. It is about mitigating physical danger. Deploy the lifeboats, evacuate the burning terminal, lock down the compromised sector. That is physical risk management.
But cultural stabilization is risk management for the soul of your brand. It is acknowledging that in the luxury sector, protecting the physical asset is just the baseline. You have to actively protect the psychological asset.
You must ensure the environment remains coherent.
You have to ensure that it retains its premium value, even when the world outside goes completely sideways.
It is the ultimate evolution in hospitality, aviation, and real estate operations.
Yeah.
You are no longer just managing the concrete, you are governing the culture.
Okay, I'm going to put my CEO hat firmly on right now. I am listening to this, and I am completely sold on the theory. I see the immense strategic value of protecting my psychological asset and automating empathy.
The value proposition is clear.
But I also have a CFO sitting across from me, and my CFO is currently screaming about CapEx.
Of course.
When I hear about a system that mathematically maps human behavior and autonomously controls lighting, sound, and digital networks across a 10 million square foot facility, I am picturing an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
I am picturing a 5-year, $100 million retrofitting process, tearing open marble walls, running thousands of miles of new fiber optic cable, installing tens of thousands of proprietary expensive sensors.
The CapEx assumption is entirely logical, but it's also entirely wrong. This brings us to the operational and technical credibility of the EURAN briefing, because the most crucial and perhaps the most surprising industrial reality of this entire framework is this. SPVI requires absolutely no new hardware.
I need you to repeat that. No new hardware.
None. Zero new hardware.
How is that physically possible? How do you map the invisible behavioral architecture of a massive crowd without installing a massive new sensor network?
You do it by recognizing the reality of modern commercial development. The environments you operate, the prime real estate towers, the mega ships, the international terminals are already entirely saturated with sensors. You have already paid for the hardware.
Oh, I see.
The briefing explicitly outlines this integration. SPVI is not a physical layer, it is a software overlay. It non-intrusively integrates with the digital infrastructure you have already deployed.
Walk me through exactly how it taps into the building.
It connects directly to your existing spatial monitoring and analytics systems. It taps into the massive network of CCTV cameras you already use for security. It pulls data from the basic foot traffic counters and MC address sniffers you already have installed at the thresholds.
And the output.
It connects via API to your existing digital signage networks, your addressable LED lighting systems, your zoned ambient acoustic controls, and your venue-level operational platforms.
So it is quite literally a brain that plugs into a nervous system the building already possesses.
Precisely. You already have a high-definition security camera pointing at the main lobby. Right now, that camera does nothing unless a crime is committed.
It just records data into a vault.
SPVI takes that existing raw video feed and runs its advanced perceptual algorithms over it. It doesn't care about the identity of the people. It cares about their geometry. It translates the movement captured on that sunk cost camera into real-time psychological meaning.
Yeah, and the lighting.
You already have an addressable LED lighting grid that your maintenance team controls with an iPad. SPVI simply takes secure control of that API to initiate its micro and macro adjustments autonomously.
The phrase EURAN uses here is perfect. This is cultural activation, not renovation. You are taking millions of dollars in sunk costs, cameras, speakers, screens that are currently passive and dumb, and you are transforming them into an active, highly sensitive perceptual intelligence network. You are simply waking the building up.
It is a masterclass in capital efficiency. You achieve a revolutionary operational capability without the massive CapEx burden of a physical refit. And because it is software-driven, the briefing highlights another massive strategic advantage: industry agnosticism.
The logic applies anywhere humans gather.
The underlying mathematics of human perception are universal. The biological reality that hesitation correlates to anxiety, or that clustering indicates engagement, does not change whether you are on a super yacht or in a corporate lobby. Human biology remains constant. What changes the operational context?
The core engine is the same, but the output is bespoke.
Exactly. In the cruise sector, the context is stabilizing perception across radically changing weather patterns and itineraries. In a luxury hotel, the context is managing the brand identity across wildly fluctuating guest profiles. How do you seamlessly transition the perceptual reality of the lobby from a loud corporate sales conference on a Thursday to a high-end, relaxed leisure crowd on a Friday?
The context shifts.
In aviation, the context is governing kinetic legibility and managing extreme cortisol levels under severe time pressure. In commercial real estate, it is about elevating and protecting the amenity value to justify premium lease rates. The tuning is bespoke, but the perceptual intelligence is universal.
Which naturally leads us to the final practical question for the decision makers listening. If I want to activate my assets, how does this actually roll out? If it's not a multi-year physical renovation, what are the actual deployment logistics?
EURAN provides a highly structured, agile implementation sequence. It is designed specifically to be non-intrusive and to integrate seamlessly with your ongoing operations. It is a 4-step sequence.
Step 1 has to be establishing the baseline.
Yes. Step 1 is MSF alignment. Before the system can measure deviations, it must know what perfection looks like. You must codify the spatial identity, the intended narrative, and the operational goals of your environment into the manager strategy framework. You define your designed reality in data terms.
Step 2 is plugging in the brain.
Step 2 is SPVI calibration. This is the integration phase. You map the existing sensors, you cap into the CCTV feeds, the network data, the audiovisual APIs, and you calibrate the behavioral algorithms to the specific physical geometry of your space.
Step 3 is flipping the switch, module activation.
Correct. You integrate the 4 intervention layers, the MNIE, PRA, CCD, and DNW, with your environmental controls. You test the triggers. You ensure that when SPVI detects mass hesitation in the south corridor, the lighting actually responds dynamically to guide them.
And finally, step 4 is continuous governance. The cybernetic loop is closed and the system runs autonomously. But what is the timeline on this? Are we talking months or years?
Because it is an integration layer utilizing existing hardware, the text highlights that initial deployment can begin within weeks. Furthermore, it scales progressively. You do not have to activate an entire 10 million square foot airport at once.
You can start small.
You can start with selected zones, perhaps a chronically problematic security concourse, or the main arrival lobby of a flagship hotel. You prove the concept, stabilize that specific environment, and then scale the software across the entire global portfolio without ever disrupting ongoing operations.
It's agile deployment for heavy industry, which is exactly the kind of risk-mitigated strategy the executive leadership requires. So let's bring all of this together. Let's synthesize the true value of this deep dive. What EURAN has outlined with the Cultural Operating System and the SPVI framework is nothing short of the missing layer between your massive capital investments and the actual lived human experience.
The ultimate bridge.
It is a system that transforms static, passive real estate into an adaptive, cybernetic organism. It reads human behavior, translates it into perceived value, and intelligently, autonomously adjusts lighting, sound, narrative, and kinetic flow in real time to fiercely protect that value.
The strategic imperative for you, the executive leader, is undeniable. EURAN frames this not as an experimental novelty, but as the inevitable evolution of operational standards in complex environments. When operational conditions shift rapidly, and they always do, the ability to mathematically measure and actively adjust human perception in real time is no longer a luxury.
It's a necessity.
It is a baseline strategic advantage that ensures your brand's experiential promise is never compromised.
It guarantees that the feeling you promised your guests on the billboard is the exact feeling they experience in reality, no matter what goes wrong behind the scenes. So I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, slightly philosophical thought to mull over. We've spent an hour discussing this as a rigorous operational tool, a mathematically precise way to protect capital investments and maximize yield. But consider the profound shift in the human relationship with the built environment. If our spaces, our towering hotels, our sprawling airports, our massive vessels can now autonomously read our physical hesitation, if they can sense our rising anxiety and subtly, quietly alter their lighting, their acoustic frequencies, and their narrative to wrap around us and reassure us, at what point does architecture cease to be merely a cold, static container we move through and instead become an active, empathetic partner in the human experience?
When an environment achieves the ability to continuously and intelligently adapt to the biological and psychological reality of the humans within it, perceptual governance ceases to be mere management. It becomes the ultimate expression of spatial mastery.